A 9-year-old boy walked into hospital alone, carrying grandmother's will. The cold fluorescent lights of Riverstone General Hospital hummed faintly as Liam James stepped through the revolving doors. His sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, drawing glances from the few patients and nurses wandering the reception area. At 9 years old, Liam was small for his age, but his confident stride and the manila envelope clutched in his hand spoke volumes. He was here with a purpose, and no amount of hospital bustle would shake him. Ruby Claire had always told Liam, "Trust your gut, kid. It'll tell you when something's off." And right now, Liam's gut told him to stay quiet. His grandmother's passing earlier that day was a heavy weight on his chest, but the fear of what might happen to her kept him moving. He remembered her stern voice as she pressed the envelope into his hands. "Don't let Ethan get his hands on this, no matter what." Liam approached the reception desk, where a harried woman in scrubs was typing furiously on her keyboard. Her name tag read, Lily May. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me, I need to see the legal department." The receptionist barely glanced at him. "Are you lost, sweetie? The pediatric wing is on the 3rd floor. Liam's chest tightened. "I'm not lost. I need to deliver something to the legal office. It's important." Lily finally looked down, her face softening into a patronizing smile. "Legal? That's not somewhere kids usually go. Who sent you?" "My grandmother," Liam said, squaring his shoulders. He couldn't tell her the whole truth. Not yet. "She told me to bring this here." Before Lily could respond, a deep voice echoed across the reception area. "There you are, Liam." Liam's stomach dropped as Ethan Cole strode into view. Dressed in a sharp suit and flanked by 2 men in plain clothes, Ethan cut an imposing figure. His smile was too polished, too practiced, and Liam knew better than to trust it. "There's been a little misunderstanding," Ethan said smoothly, addressing Lily but keeping his eyes on Liam. "This boy's my cousin. He's been through a lot today. I'll take care of him." Liam took a step back. "I'm fine on my own," he said firmly. Ethan's smile faltered, his gaze hardening. "Now, Liam, let's not make a scene. Trust your gut." Liam clutched the envelope tighter and turned on his heel, darting toward the nearest hallway. Behind him, Ethan barked orders to his men. Liam's heart pounded as he navigated the unfamiliar corridors. He didn't have a plan yet, only the knowledge that he couldn't let Ethan catch him. Ruby had told him stories about Ethan's greed, his willingness to manipulate anyone to get what he wanted. If Ethan got hold of the will, everything Ruby had worked for would be gone. He spotted a janitor pushing a cart into a utility closet and quickly slipped inside before the door could close. The smell of bleach stung his nose, and the faint hum of the building's air system filled the silence. He crouched behind a stack of cleaning supplies, clutching the envelope to his chest. Think, Liam. Think. He needed to buy time and figure out where the legal department was. The receptionist hadn't been any help, and now Ethan's goons were probably combing the hospital for him. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of muffled voices outside the door. "Check every room," one of Ethan's men said. "He couldn't have gone far." Liam's breath hitched. He glanced around the closet, spotting a metal grate near the floor, a vent just big enough for him to squeeze through. He crawled over and pried it open with trembling hands. The space beyond was dark and narrow, but it was his best chance. Sliding the envelope into his jacket, Liam wriggled into the vent and began to crawl. The hospital's ventilation system was a maze of twisting tunnels, and the further Liam went, the harder it was to keep track of his direction. His hands and knees ached from the metal grates, but he pushed on, listening for any sign of Ethan's men. He paused at a junction, peering through another vent grate into an office below. A woman in a crisp white blouse. Her nameplate read Stella Quinn, was typing on a laptop, surrounded by stacks of paperwork. Liam's eyes widened. The door behind her bore a sign, Legal Services. Finally. Relief flooded through him. He was close. But as Liam studied the room, he spotted another figure stepping into the office. Ethan. Liam's relief turned to dread as he watched Ethan exchange words with Stella. The vent muffled their voices, but Ethan's body language was tense. He leaned over Stella's desk, gesturing emphatically. Stella looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the door as if considering an escape. Liam pressed his ear to the vent, straining to hear. "Just a matter of formality," Ethan was saying. "The boy's confused. I can handle it." Stella frowned. "If there's a legal document involved, it's my responsibility to ensure it's handled properly. You can't expect me to ignore protocol." Ethan's smile was thin and dangerous. "Let's not make this complicated, Stella. You wouldn't want to jeopardize your position over a misunderstanding, would you?" Liam's hands balled into fists. Ethan was trying to intimidate her, just like he intimidated everyone else. Liam knew he had to act fast. He crawled further down the vent until he reached another grate that opened into the hallway. Carefully, he pushed it aside and dropped to the floor, landing in a crouch. The corridor was quiet, but he didn't have much time. Ethan's men could appear at any moment. Liam ducked into a nearby alcove, pulling out the envelope. He scanned the hallway for cameras. One was positioned near the ceiling, angled just enough to capture the entrance to the legal office. Perfect. Liam stepped into the camera's view, holding up the envelope so the lens could clearly see it. Then he placed it inside a nearby locker and spun the combination lock. Ruby had taught him the code years ago when they visited the hospital for her checkups. Satisfied, Liam turned and sprinted toward the exit. The hallway stretched ahead of Liam, his sneakers slapping lightly against the polished floor. He kept his head low, blending as much as a 9-year-old with a manila envelope could in a bustling hospital. Behind him, faint echoes of voices hinted that Ethan's men were nearby. Every instinct told him to move quickly, but quietly. He darted around a corner and slipped into a waiting area filled with people, patients scrolling on their phones, nurses chatting in low tones, and a tired man flipping through an old magazine. Liam found a spot behind a row of chairs, his heart pounding as he crouched low. The envelope in his jacket felt heavier now, like it knew the stakes had risen. Peering through the gaps in the chairs, Liam spotted one of Ethan's goons. The man was tall, with a wiry frame, and sharp eyes that scanned the room like a hawk. Liam flattened himself against the floor, willing himself to stay invisible. The man lingered for a moment, then moved on, muttering into his phone. Liam exhaled slowly. He didn't have much time before they searched this area too. His mind raced through options. He needed to get back to the locker where he'd hidden the envelope, but Ethan and his men were circling closer with every minute. He thought about Ruby's words again. Don't let fear stop you, Liam. It's just noise trying to drown out what you already know. From his hiding spot, Liam noticed a nurse pushing a cart of supplies toward the legal wing. She wore an ID badge clipped to her scrubs, the laminated card swinging with each step. An idea sparked in Liam's mind. He waited until she passed by, then crept out of his hiding spot and followed her at a safe distance. The nurse stopped at a supply closet and rummaged through the cart. Liam took a deep breath, then tapped her on the shoulder. She turned, startled, her brow furrowing at the sight of him. "Hey there, kid. You lost?" "I'm trying to find the legal department," Liam said, keeping his voice steady. "I need to drop something off for my grandmother." The nurse's expression softened. "The legal department? That's an odd place for a kid to be heading. What's so important? Liam hesitated. It's private, for their eyes only. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. It's down the west corridor. You'll see a big frosted glass door with a sign, but you shouldn't be wandering around alone. I'll be okay, Liam said quickly, already backing away. Thank you. Before she could press further, Liam was off again, his sneakers squeaking faintly as he rounded another corner. The west corridor stretched out in front of him, its sterile white walls illuminated by the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. At the far end, he saw the frosted glass door the nurse had mentioned. He moved cautiously, his eyes darting to every shadow and sound. The corridor felt too quiet now, the kind of quiet that made every small noise feel magnified. Halfway down the hall, Liam froze. Voices. Not far behind him. Check the west wing, one of the men said, his tone clipped and impatient. The kid's got nowhere else to go. Liam's heart raced. He needed to get to the legal department, but if Ethan's men spotted him, it would all be over. He scanned the corridor again, looking for anything that could buy him time. His eyes landed on a laundry cart parked near a service elevator. Without thinking, he darted toward it and climbed in, burrowing beneath a pile of fresh linens. The faint smell of detergent filled his nose as he tried to steady his breathing. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing louder. Liam clutched his knees to his chest, every muscle tense as the voices drew closer. You sure he came this way? One man asked. Where else would he go? Kid's not a ghost. The cart shifted slightly as one of the men brushed past it. Liam bit his lip, willing himself to stay still. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours before the footsteps finally faded. He waited a moment longer, then peeked out from under the linens. The hallway was clear. He slipped out of the cart and sprinted the remaining distance to the frosted glass door. The words, "Legal Services," were etched neatly across the surface. Liam pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. The office was quiet, with rows of filing cabinets lining the walls and a desk cluttered with papers and a laptop. Stella Quinn, the woman Liam had seen earlier, sat at the desk, her brow furrowed as she typed. She looked up when the door creaked, her expression turning to confusion when she saw Liam. Can I help you? Stella asked, standing. Liam stepped inside, glancing over his shoulder before closing the door behind him. I need to talk to you. It's about my grandmother's will. Stella's expression softened, but her eyes remained cautious. Your grandmother's will? Are you here alone? Liam nodded. It's important. She told me to bring it here, but there are people trying to take it from me. People? Stella asked, her voice sharpening. Who? My cousin Ethan, Liam said, his voice trembling slightly. He wants to take everything she left. He's here, and he has men looking for me. Stella's face hardened at the mention of Ethan's name. She motioned for Liam to sit down. Let me see what you've got. Liam hesitated. I hid the will in a locker. I didn't know who to trust. That was smart, Stella said, nodding. Do you remember which locker? Yes, but Ethan's men are watching the halls. I barely got here. Stella paced the room, her mind working quickly. Okay, here's what we'll do. I'll call hospital security and have them escort you out safely. Then we can retrieve the will. No, Liam said, his voice rising. Ethan has people everywhere. If they see security, they'll know where I am. I need to do this quietly. Stella hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she studied Liam. You're a brave kid, I'll give you that. But this is dangerous. Ethan won't back down. I know, Liam said firmly. But my grandmother trusted me. I have to do this. Stella sighed, then grabbed a piece of paper from her desk. She scribbled something down and handed it to Liam. Here, that's my direct number. If anything goes wrong, you call me, understand? Liam nodded, folding the paper and slipping it into his pocket. Thank you. Stella knelt to meet his eyes. Be careful, Liam, and stay out of sight. Liam nodded again, then slipped out the door and back into the corridor. His mind raced as he retraced his steps, heading toward the locker where he'd hidden the envelope. The stakes felt higher now, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let Ruby down. Liam retraced his steps cautiously, every sound around him amplified in the silence of the hospital's long, sterile corridors. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, each step feeling louder than it should. The locker was just 2 turns away now. He'd memorized its location before tucking the envelope inside, making sure no one was watching. But getting back to it without being spotted was a different challenge altogether. The faint murmur of voices made him freeze mid-step. He pressed himself against the wall, craning his neck to catch a glimpse of who it was. 2 of Ethan's men lingered near the intersection up ahead, their conversation low but tense. Liam couldn't make out their words, but their restless movements said enough. They were waiting, watching, ready to intercept him if he tried to make a move. Liam bit his lip, glancing around for another way to reach the locker. To his right was a storage room with a half-open door, shadows spilling across the floor. To his left, a sign pointed toward a stairwell. He chose the storage room, slipping inside and crouching low behind a stack of boxes. From his hiding spot, Liam tried to think of a plan. The men were blocking the most direct route, and going back the way he came wasn't an option. He couldn't risk being seen. His fingers brushed the crumpled note Stella had given him, her phone number a potential lifeline. But something stopped him from calling. She had already done enough, and the more people involved, the higher the risk Ethan would find out. Liam's eyes landed on a small metal cart near the back of the room. It was filled with rolled-up blankets, and an idea began to form. If he could use the cart to create a distraction, he might be able to draw the men away long enough to slip past them. He grabbed one of the rolled blankets and tossed it into the far corner of the room, making sure it landed with a soft thud. The sound was faint, but noticeable, and it was enough to make one of the men glance in the direction of the storage room. "What was that?" the man muttered, taking a step toward the door. "Probably just the janitor," the other replied, his tone dismissive. "Yeah, well, check anyway. The kid could be hiding anywhere." Liam held his breath as the man entered the storage room, his heavy footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. The man scanned the space, his eyes narrowing as he moved closer to where Liam was hiding. Liam crouched lower, his hands gripping the edge of a box to steady himself. The man paused, his gaze sweeping over the room one last time. Then, with a grunt, he turned and walked out. "Nothing here," he called to his partner. Liam exhaled silently, relief washing over him, but he knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. The longer he waited, the more likely it was that Ethan would grow suspicious. He needed to move now, while the men were still distracted. He crept to the edge of the storage room, peering out into the hallway. The second man had wandered a few steps away, his back turned as he scanned the opposite direction. Liam seized the opportunity, darting out of the storage room and slipping into the stairwell. The echo of his footsteps in the stairwell made him wince, but he kept moving, his focus locked on getting to the locker. He descended one flight, then another, finally reaching the right level. The hallway outside the stairwell was eerily quiet, but Liam didn't let his guard down. He moved quickly, his eyes darting to every shadow and corner. The locker was just ahead now, its familiar gray door a beacon of hope. Liam approached it cautiously, glancing around to make sure the hallway was clear. He spun the combination lock with practiced ease, his hands steady despite the tension coiled in his chest. The locker clicked open, revealing the manila envelope exactly where he'd left it. Liam grabbed it and tucked it back into his jacket, relief flooding through him. But the moment was short-lived. A shadow fell across the floor in front of him, and Liam's stomach dropped. He turned slowly to see Ethan standing at the far end of the hallway, his expression a mixture of triumph and cold determination. "Well, well," Ethan said, his voice smooth and taunting. "You've been quite the troublemaker today, haven't you, Liam?" Liam's mind raced. He glanced around for an escape route, but the hallway was a dead end. Ethan began to walk toward him, his footsteps measured and deliberate. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," Ethan continued, his eyes locked on Liam. "Why don't you hand it over, and we can put all this behind us?" Liam took a step back, his hand instinctively tightening around the envelope. "It's not yours," he said, his voice shaking but defiant. Ethan's smile turned icy. "That's not for you to decide." As Ethan closed the distance, Liam's fingers brushed against the small recorder tucked into his pocket. It was part of the toy detective kit Ruby had given him for his birthday, something he'd carried around ever since. A plan began to form, desperate but possible. Liam pressed the recorder's button, the device concealed in his pocket. "Why do you want the will so bad, Ethan?" he asked, his voice louder now, as if summoning courage. Ethan paused, his expression shifting to one of suspicion. "That's none of your concern." "It's because you know what's in it, don't you?" Liam continued, his voice steadying. "You're scared everyone's going to find out what you've done." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Watch your mouth, kid. You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe I don't," Liam said, taking a step forward. "But I think you do. Why else would you be here, chasing me through the hospital?" For a moment, Ethan seemed to falter, his carefully constructed mask slipping. Then, with a snarl, he lunged toward Liam. Liam darted to the side, just out of Ethan's reach. The manila envelope slipped from his jacket, landing on the floor between them. Ethan's eyes locked on it, and he reached down to grab it. But Liam was faster. He kicked the envelope toward the far end of the hallway, out of Ethan's immediate reach. The motion caught Ethan off guard, and he stumbled slightly as he turned to chase after it. Liam didn't waste a second. He bolted past Ethan, his sneakers squeaking against the floor as he ran. He didn't look back, his focus solely on putting as much distance as possible between himself and Ethan. The recorder in his pocket felt like a lifeline now. He knew it had captured everything Ethan had said, every word dripping with arrogance and greed. It wasn't over yet, but Liam finally felt like he had a fighting chance. He rounded a corner, his breath coming in short gasps. The legal office was just ahead, and Stella stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of relief and urgency. Liam sprinted toward her, clutching the recorder tightly in his hand. Liam skidded to a halt in front of Stella, his chest heaving as he thrust the recorder into her hand. Her brows knit in confusion, but she didn't ask questions right away. Instead, she pulled him into the office and shut the door firmly behind them. Outside, muffled footsteps echoed down the hall. Ethan's men weren't far behind. Stella crouched to Liam's level, her gaze serious. "What's this?" Liam gulped in air, trying to catch his breath. "It's a recording. Ethan, he was saying things. Stuff about the will. I thought you might need proof." Her expression shifted, recognition dawning as she turned the recorder over in her hands. You're telling me you just got Ethan to admit something? On tape? He said enough, Liam said, his voice steadying. I think it's bad. He's scared of what's in the will. Stella stood, her movements quick and purposeful as she grabbed a set of headphones from her desk. She plugged them into the recorder and pressed play, her expression tightening as she listened. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of hospital machinery outside the door. When she pulled off the headphones, her lips were pressed into a thin line. This is big, Liam. If what he said is true, it could completely change everything. But it also means you're in more danger than I thought. Liam stiffened. You believe me? Of course I do, she said firmly. But believing you and keeping you safe are two different things. Ethan's not going to let this go. Liam hesitated, glancing at the door. What do we do now? Stella exhaled slowly, her mind clearly racing. First, we make sure this recorder stays safe. Then, we need to find a way to deliver that will without Ethan interfering. The problem is, he's already got people everywhere. Liam pulled the manila envelope out from his jacket and placed it on her desk. This is what he wants. If we get it to the right person, he can't do anything, right? In theory, yes, Stella said, carefully picking up the envelope. But Ethan has influence, Liam. He knows people, and he's not afraid to play dirty. We need to be smarter than him. A loud knock on the door made both of them jump. Stella moved quickly, sliding the envelope into her desk drawer and locking it before gesturing for Liam to hide. He ducked behind a filing cabinet as she crossed to the door, her expression calm but guarded. She cracked the door open slightly, just enough to see who was on the other side. Can I help you? A familiar voice answered, smooth and calculated. Stella, it's me. I was hoping we could talk. Liam froze, recognizing Ethan's voice immediately. He pressed himself tighter against the cabinet, willing himself to stay silent. Stella's grip on the door tightened, but her tone remained professional. Now's not a good time, Ethan. I'm in the middle of something. This won't take long, Ethan said, his tone deceptively pleasant. I just wanted to follow up on our earlier conversation about that will. Stella didn't budge. I told you before, any legal matters have to go through the proper channels. If you want to contest anything, you'll need to file a formal request. I'm just trying to save us both some time, Ethan replied, his voice dropping slightly. You're not going to get in trouble for cooperating, you know. I can make this easier for you. I'm not interested in easier, Stella said firmly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Ethan hesitated, the weight of his silence filling the space. Then with a forced chuckle, he backed off. All right, have it your way. But don't say I didn't warn you. Stella waited until his footsteps faded, before closing the door and locking it. She turned back to Liam, her expression a mix of frustration and concern. He's not going to stop. If we don't act fast, he'll find another way to get to this. Liam stepped out from behind the cabinet. What do we do? Stella grabbed her phone, dialing quickly. We're going to need backup. Someone who can help us get this where it needs to go. She paused, glancing at Liam. But we'll have to move carefully. If Ethan figures out what we're doing, this could all blow up. Liam watched as she spoke quietly into the phone. Her tone clipped and urgent. He couldn't hear all the details, but he caught enough to know that she was asking for help from someone she trusted. When she hung up, she grabbed her bag and motioned for Liam to follow. We're leaving, she said. There's someone I know who can keep this safe. But we need to get out of here before Ethan comes back. Liam nodded, gripping the strap of his backpack tightly as they slipped out of the office. The hospital halls were quieter now, the late hour thinning the usual flow of patients and staff. Stella led the way, her pace quick but steady as she navigated toward the back exit. They were halfway there when Liam spotted a figure rounding the corner ahead. It was one of Ethan's men, his sharp eyes scanning the hallway. Stella pulled Liam into an alcove, pressing a finger to her lips as they waited for the man to pass. Liam held his breath, his heart hammering in his chest. The man lingered for a moment, then continued down the hall, disappearing from view. Stella exhaled softly. "We'll have to take another route," she whispered. They doubled back, moving through a maze of corridors until they finally reached a side door that led to the parking lot. Stella pushed it open, the cool night air washing over them as they stepped outside. The lot was mostly empty, the rows of cars casting long shadows under the dim lights. A black sedan pulled up near the door, its headlights flashing once. Stella motioned for Liam to stay close as the car door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with a no-nonsense demeanor, and a sharp suit that hinted at his authority. "Stella," the man said, his tone brisk, "you said it was urgent?" "It is," Stella replied, handing him the recorder and the envelope. "This is the will, and this recorder has evidence that could tie Ethan Cole to some serious fraud." The man's brow furrowed as he examined the items. "Ethan Cole? He's been under investigation for months. This could be exactly what we need to finally nail him." Liam stepped forward, his voice small but determined. "He's trying to steal everything my grandmother left. She told me to bring this here. I couldn't let him take it." The man crouched slightly to meet Liam's gaze, his expression softening. "You've done a brave thing, kid. We'll make sure this gets to the right people. Ethan won't get away with this." Liam felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew it wasn't over yet. Ethan wouldn't stop just because the evidence was out of his hands. He would find another way to fight back. But for now, Liam had done what Ruby asked of him. He had kept her will safe, just like she trusted him to. The black sedan pulled away into the night, taking the will and the recorder with it. Liam stood on the edge of the hospital parking lot, staring after the car until it disappeared. The man had promised to deliver the evidence to the right authorities, but even as relief began to settle in his chest, a nagging sense of unease crept in. Ethan wouldn't give up this easily. Stella knelt beside Liam, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did everything you could, Liam. Your grandmother would be proud of you." Liam looked up at her, his young face hardened with determination beyond his years. "It's not over, is it? Ethan's not going to stop just because we sent the will away." Stella sighed, glancing toward the hospital's entrance. "You're right. Ethan's persistent, and he doesn't play by the rules. But now we've got people involved who can fight back. We're not alone in this anymore." The distant sound of a car engine brought both of their heads snapping toward the entrance. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows rolled into the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the shadows. Liam's heart sank as the vehicle stopped abruptly near the emergency exit. Two men climbed out, both dressed in dark suits, their expressions grim and focused. "It's Ethan's men," Stella muttered, pulling Liam back toward the shadows of the side entrance. "They're here already." Liam's pulse quickened as he spotted Ethan stepping out of the SUV, his confident stride unmistakable. He scanned the parking lot, his eyes sharp and calculating, like a predator searching for its prey. Stella quickly ushered Liam inside, the cool night air replaced by the sterile chill of the hospital corridors. "We need to stay out of sight," Stella whispered, her voice low but firm. "If they find us, they'll try to force us to tell them where the will is, and we can't let that happen." Liam nodded, his small hands clenched into fists. His mind raced, searching for a way to stay ahead of Ethan's men. The hospital was large, A labyrinth of hallways and departments, but it didn't feel big enough now. Ethan's men were relentless, and Liam knew they would tear the place apart if they had to. They moved quickly, weaving through empty corridors and slipping into darkened rooms whenever footsteps echoed nearby. Stella kept her phone in her hand, ready to call for help if necessary, but for now, they were on their own. As they passed the radiology department, Liam paused, his eyes catching on a sign that read, "Maintenance Access." An idea sparked in his mind, and he tugged on Stella's sleeve. "We can use the maintenance tunnels," he said, his voice hushed. "I saw them when I was hiding before. They run under the hospital." Stella glanced at the sign, her brows furrowing in thought. "That's risky. If we get lost down there, it could take hours to find our way out." "It's better than staying here," Liam insisted. "They'll check every hallway eventually. We need to keep moving." Stella hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "All right, let's do it." They slipped through the maintenance door, the stark white of the hospital giving way to the dim, industrial feel of the underground tunnels. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint metallic scent of machinery and cleaning supplies. Liam led the way, his smaller frame making it easier to navigate the narrow passages. The sound of distant voices echoed down the tunnels, growing louder with each passing moment. Ethan's men had followed them here, their footsteps heavy against the concrete floor. Stella grabbed Liam's arm, pulling him into a side passage as the voices drew closer. "Where are they?" one man barked, his tone edged with frustration. "We can't let them get away." "They're down here somewhere," another replied. "Keep searching." Liam pressed himself against the wall, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Stella crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the dimly lit passage for any sign of an escape route. The tunnels were a maze, and one wrong turn could lead them straight into Ethan's men. "We need to create a distraction," Stella whispered, her voice barely audible. "Something to draw them away from us." Liam's eyes darted to a stack of old crates piled against the far wall. He crept over to them, careful not to make a sound, and began pushing one of the smaller crates toward the center of the passage. Stella watched, her brow furrowed in confusion, until she realized what he was doing. Using all his strength, Liam shoved the crate over, sending it crashing to the ground. The loud clatter echoed through the tunnels, bouncing off the walls and masking their location. Stella grabbed his hand, and they took off in the opposite direction, their footsteps muffled against the concrete floor. The voices grew more distant as they ran, the men distracted by the noise. Liam's chest burned with each breath, but he pushed himself to keep going, his determination stronger than his exhaustion. They rounded another corner and found themselves at a metal door marked Staff Access. Stella tried the handle, and to their relief, it opened easily. The door led to a back stairwell, dimly lit and seemingly abandoned. Stella motioned for Liam to follow as they climbed, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the thick concrete walls. At the top of the stairs, they emerged into an empty hallway that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Stella leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "I think we lost them," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Liam nodded, his own breathing ragged. "What do we do now?" "We need to get out of here," Stella said. "I'll call the man from earlier and let him know what's happening. He'll send someone to pick us up." Before she could dial, the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Stella's head snapped toward the door, her expression shifting from relief to alarm. Ethan's men weren't far behind. Liam's mind raced, searching for a way to stay ahead of them. His eyes landed on a ventilation grate near the floor, the screws rusted and loose. He dropped to his knees, prying at the edges until the grate came free. The vent was small, but just big enough for him to crawl through. "Get in," Liam said, motioning for Stella. She hesitated, glancing at the narrow opening. "I don't think I'll fit." "You don't have to," Liam said, his voice firm. "Just wait here and buy me some time. I'll find a way to get help." "Liam, no." "Please," he interrupted. "It's the only way." Stella looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and admiration. Finally, she nodded. "Be careful." Liam crawled into the vent, the cool metal pressing against his hands and knees. He moved quickly but quietly, the sound of his own breathing loud in the confined space. Behind him, he heard the door burst open, followed by the heavy footsteps of Ethan's men. He kept moving, the vent twisting and turning as it carried him further from the danger. Finally, he reached another grate and peered through it, his heart pounding as he saw where it led. The emergency exit was just below, the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the door's window. Liam pushed the grate open and climbed out, his sneakers landing softly on the floor. He slipped through the emergency exit, the cool night air a welcome relief against his flushed skin. The parking lot was quiet now, Ethan's SUV nowhere in sight. For the first time since this began, Liam felt a spark of hope. He had escaped, and now he had to find help before Ethan could catch up. As he started toward the street, he glanced back at the hospital, determination burning in his chest. This wasn't over, but he wasn't giving up. Not now, not ever. Liam ran through the quiet streets near the hospital, the city lights casting long shadows as he tried to stay out of sight. His mind raced, searching for the next step. Stella was still inside, and Ethan's men were hunting them both. He didn't know where the sedan had gone, or if the evidence was safe. All he knew was that he couldn't stop moving. If Ethan caught him, it would all be over. He turned down a narrow alley, the sound of distant cars fading into the background. His breath came in short, ragged gasps, his legs aching from the constant running. The cold night air stung his skin, but he didn't dare slow down. He needed to think, to find a place where he could figure out what to do next. The alley opened into a small courtyard behind an old convenience store. Trash bins lined the walls, and the faint glow of a flickering street lamp illuminated the area. Liam crouched behind one of the bins, trying to catch his breath. His mind replayed everything that had happened. The will, the recorder, Ethan's threats. He thought about Ruby and the promise he'd made to her. He couldn't let Ethan win. A sound from the street caught his attention, the low rumble of an engine approaching. Liam pressed himself tighter against the bin, peering around the corner. A black SUV crept slowly down the road, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Liam's heart sank as he recognized it. Ethan was still looking for him. The SUV slowed, its engine idling as the driver scanned the area. Liam held his breath, his body tense as he watched the vehicle. He couldn't stay hidden here for long. If they decided to search the alley, he would be trapped. His eyes darted around the courtyard, searching for another way out. His gaze landed on a fire escape, the rusted metal ladder hanging just within reach. It led to the roof of the convenience store, offering a potential escape route. Liam glanced back at the SUV, its engine still rumbling softly, and made his decision. He bolted for the ladder, his sneakers slapping against the pavement. The sound drew the attention of the men in the SUV, and he heard the door slam open behind him. "There he is!" one of them shouted. Liam leapt for the ladder. his fingers gripping the cold metal as he pulled himself up. He climbed as fast as he could, his heart pounding as shouts echoed below. The ladder rattled under his weight, but he didn't stop until he reached the rooftop. He hauled himself over the edge, sprawling onto the gravel-covered surface. He didn't have time to rest. Scrambling to his feet, he ran toward the far side of the roof, the city stretching out before him in a maze of lights and shadows. Below, the men were shouting orders, their voices growing more distant as Liam put space between them. He climbed down another fire escape on the far side of the building, landing in a quiet alley that opened onto a main street. He pulled his hood up, trying to blend in as he stepped onto the sidewalk. The city was busier here, the noise of cars and pedestrians masking his presence. Liam kept his head down, weaving through the crowd as he made his way toward the subway station. He didn't know where he was going yet, but he needed to stay ahead of Ethan. As he descended the stairs into the station, the sound of the city faded into the hum of trains and the chatter of commuters. Liam fished a few coins out of his pocket, change from a snack Ruby had bought him earlier in the week, and used them to buy a ticket. He boarded the first train he saw, choosing a seat near the back where he could keep an eye on the doors. The train lurched forward, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks soothing his frayed nerves. For the first time in what felt like hours, Liam allowed himself to think. He needed to find Stella. She had promised to help him, and he knew she would. But she was still in the hospital, and Ethan's men were probably watching every exit. Liam pulled the recorder out of his pocket, turning it over in his hands. It was small and unassuming, but it held the key to exposing Ethan. He didn't know if the authorities had listened to the first recording yet, but he had a backup now. He just needed to get it to someone who could use it. As the train rocked gently, Liam's thoughts drifted to Ruby. She had always told him to be brave, to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. He could almost hear her voice now, calm and steady, reminding him that he wasn't alone. The train screeched to a stop at the next station, jolting Liam back to reality. A group of passengers boarded, their voices blending into the background noise. Liam glanced toward the doors, his eyes scanning for any sign of Ethan's men. He didn't see them, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still close. When the train reached the next stop, Liam slipped off, blending into the crowd as he exited the station. He didn't know where he was, but the streets were quieter here, the tall buildings casting long shadows in the moonlight. He found a payphone near the corner and dialed the number Stella had given him. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice a mix of relief and urgency. "Liam, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said quickly, glancing over his shoulder. "I got away. Where are you?" "I'm still at the hospital," Stella said. "Ethan's men are all over the place. I had to lock myself in one of the offices." Liam's stomach tightened. "I don't know what to do. I have the recorder, but I don't know where to take it." Stella hesitated for a moment. "There's a police station a few blocks from where you are. If you can get there, they'll know what to do. Tell them about the will and the recording. They've been looking into Ethan for months." Liam nodded, gripping the phone tightly. "Okay, I'll go now." "Be careful," Stella said. "And Liam, thank you for everything." Liam hung up, the weight of her words settling over him. He didn't have time to dwell on it. He turned toward the direction Stella had given him, his legs moving automatically as he navigated the unfamiliar streets. The police station came into view after a few blocks, its bright lights and official cars parked outside a welcome site. Liam quickened his pace, his heart pounding as he approached the front steps. But just as he reached the door, a hand grabbed his shoulder, yanking him back. He spun around to see one of Ethan's men towering over him, his face twisted into a scowl. "Thought you could run, huh?" the man growled, his grip tightening. Liam struggled, his mind racing. He couldn't let them take the recorder. He reached into his pocket, gripping the small device tightly as the man dragged him toward a waiting car. Suddenly, the sound of sirens filled the air, blue and red lights flashing as a police car screeched to a halt nearby. Officers poured out, their weapons drawn as they surrounded the scene. "Let the boy go," one of them ordered, their voices firm and commanding. The man hesitated, his grip loosening just enough for Liam to pull free. He stumbled toward the officers, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. "He has evidence," Liam said breathlessly. "About Ethan Cole. It's all on here." The officers moved quickly, detaining the man and ushering Liam into the station. For the first time, he felt safe. The weight of the night's events began to lift as he handed over the recorder, knowing he had done everything he could. Ruby's voice echoed in his mind again, her words a source of strength. He had kept his promise, and now the fight was in the hands of those who could finish it. Liam sat quietly as the officers began their work, his small frame finally relaxing. Liam sat in the police station, the chaos of the night finally settling into a calm hum around him. Officers bustled back and forth, taking statements, making calls, and examining the evidence he had delivered. Across the room, Stella entered, her face lighting up with relief when she saw him. She knelt beside him, wrapping him in a tight hug. "You did it, Liam," she said softly. "It's over." For the first time in hours, Liam felt safe. He handed the recorder to the officer in charge, who gave him a firm nod. "This is exactly what we needed. Ethan Cole's days of getting away with this are over." Ethan's men had been detained, and reports were already coming in that Ethan himself had been apprehended while trying to flee the hospital. The police now had the will, the recorder, and enough evidence to put Ethan's schemes to an end. Ruby's legacy, and the home she had worked so hard to protect, would remain intact. Liam leaned back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. Ruby's words echoed in his mind. "Do what's right, even when it's hard." He had done exactly that, and though he was tired, he knew she would be proud. Stella stayed with him until a social worker arrived to ensure he'd be taken care of. The officer in charge came by one last time to assure Liam that Ethan wouldn't bother him again. As Liam left the station under Stella's watchful eye, the first rays of dawn painted the sky. For the first time since Ruby had passed, Liam allowed himself a small smile. He had kept his promise. He had stood up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against him. "You're one tough kid," Stella said, ruffling his hair as they walked. Liam glanced up at her, his determination still shining in his young eyes. "I had the best teacher." The city buzzed around them, but for Liam, the world felt quieter now, like a chapter had closed, and something new was waiting just ahead. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.